This video is an introduction to reports in ThunderPOS. This is not going to cover every report in detail, but rather is going to show you how to run reports, how to schedule reports, and if you want to see information about every report in detail, we do have a report-specific manual available that we would suggest looking at. But for now, let's look over to our system. So the basics of reports, you just go under reports here after logging in. We are logged in as an administrator, so we have access to all reports, but you can control access to reports on an employee basis. You can either set them up to have access to all reports, or you can actually set it up so that each individual report you can grant or deny permission to. Now, there are a number of reports here that are more important generally than others, but everything here could be useful to you depending on what you do. I'm going to touch on what are probably the two most important reports in kind of more detail here, starting with the sales totals report. So we see along the left here that reports are grouped by the type, and you just click the plus next to each one to see the report types there. And the first one under sales is totals. This report is what you're going to use to count down your cash drawer. It's what you're going to use for reporting taxes. Like, this is probably the most important report in the system. So when you're running it, it actually has a couple of extra options compared to other reports. First, most of the reports that have anything to do with transactions have a date range that you can put in. Let's just run this one for the first week of the year. You can then filter this particular report by a few other things, by employees or registers, especially if you're counting down a cash drawer. This can be important. And then you can show itemized sales. Let's go ahead and choose to do that. So then if we run the report here, this is going to give us our basic view of the report. This option is going to appear for pretty much all of the reports. And you will get it to come up in this report viewer. For reports where you can navigate, you'll have a box on the left where you can go to your different departments, in this case for the items sold, since we grouped them by departments. You also can print, of course, the report. You can export the report. And then if you have your email configuration set up, you can send an emailed copy of the report in either PDF form or Excel form. Those particular links just send a copy of the report you have on screen. However, if we look here to manage scheduled reports, you can set up a recurring email to be sent of a PDF, or if you don't send it as PDF, it sends it as Excel. In order to use this, you're going to need the email settings to be configured under the settings section of the software with a valid email account to send it from. And then you will also want to keep in mind that it runs these reports as soon as it can. And for ones that use a time range like this, if you set it to run daily, then each day after midnight, assuming you have the software still open, or whenever you next open the software, it will send you the previous day's total. So like if it ran it today, it would send out the report for January 11th. If we were to select weekly, then it will send a report for the week before. So each week you would get a report and it would cover the time frame of the week before. So it's important to keep in mind for ones that have a date range that's how you get it. You won't, like if you run it weekly, you get a week's worth of data when it runs. Now, if we return here, the options that are here that are not available on other reports are these two right here. Text report allows you to get a text version of this report that just pops up in Notepad here. We'll show that here in a moment. And then print to receipt will actually print off a copy that is formatted for your receipt printer to your selected receipt printer in settings. And both of those are specific to this report because it is so important. The other report I want to particularly highlight is item list. This report gives you a listing of all of your items. It is run separately for new and used, simply because in order for it to be printable, we have to limit the amount of options that are on there. And you can filter it to only items you have not at zero stock or only items you actually have in stock. You can also filter it to only have items that don't have zero cost. That can be kind of useful if you're what you really want to run this report for, almost certainly at least once a year, is you are going to want your value at the end of year. And all of the item reports are for the current inventory. There's no way to like go back and look other than restoring a backup. So we really recommend, a lot of people set up an emailed report of the item list to go out on January 1st so that they have their item inventory level at the end of year ready to go for accounting purposes. So those are kind of the two that I'm going to talk about in detail. But just to kind of briefly run through some of the others that are kind of highlights. Under sales, we've got buy and then a number of different things. These break down your sales over a period by where the item is, or by when it was sold, or by which employee checked it out, or by the customer, a number of other things. The audit reports here, these three are for changes in inventory. Audit quantity depends on you having a setting on called audit quantity changes that requires when somebody changes your stock level for them to enter a reason, and it records it. And this report is how you can see the reasons. Audit price and cost changes don't require a reason, but if somebody changes those fields directly in inventory, then it will record there so that you can know who did that. The top sellers report kind of is a standout. It will show you over a period of time just the items you sold the most copies of. Items by category, department, vendor kind of give you a listing just of one part of your inventory. It's like a very small portion of the item list report. Idle items shows you the items that have not been sold or ordered in a certain time period, just based on when you set there. And then under transactions, you can see here information about particular transactions, about customer account transactions, if somebody's got suspended items, that kind of thing. Under customers, there's reports related to account balances, to discount cards, to your customer address list. But if it's any kind of sales history other than sales history for a specific customer, you'll want to look elsewhere. Like if you want a list of all of your transactions with which customer it was, that's under transactions, not under customers. Store information contains reports that are kind of just lists of your departments and categories, that kind of thing, as well as your outstanding gift card balances. Rentals contains reports related to the rental feature. If you're not using the rental feature, you can just safely ignore that entire section. Then others has some miscellaneous reports that don't quite fit into any of those other categories. Things related to labor scheduling and the time clock, things related to repairs, the special order report, and then a couple of highlights here. The employee metrics and employee activity. Under transactions, you can see which employee actually checked out a transaction, which one finalized a transaction. But if you want to see how much business you're doing while particular people are clocked in using the time clock feature, then employee metrics will kind of give you a sense for that. Um, and we would kind of recommend using those particular reports if you are using the time clock. It's a nice payoff for using the time clock within the system. That's going to about cover it, but again, take a look. There will be a link in the description down below to the reports manual that includes samples of all of the reports that we've mentioned here and a lot more detail on them. So if you have any questions, you can contact support